morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Robin Gauthier, Executive Director of Samaritan House. My esteemed colleagues and I will each speak for about 2 minutes, and then we'll be able to answer some questions and be available for interviews after we talk. Samaritan House has been providing critical services to victims of domestic violence and homelessness for more than 40 years, and in the last 10 years, victims of human trafficking. We've come here today with a collective voice, a voice that is resonating with urgency. We've witnessed a steady decrease of funding for victims of domestic and sexual violence in the state of Virginia. The Victims of Crime Act, or VOCA, has been the cornerstone of support for victims of violence in this state and has decreased sharply. It's at a critical point of coming down 47.5% if we do not act now. This funding provides critical services, safety, and support for our fellow citizens, victims of crime who have experienced the trauma of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking in Hampton Roads. It provides services that are critical to survivors' safety, such as 24-hour hotlines, safe emergency shelters, victim advocates who work directly with law enforcement and the courts to help victims gain protective orders. These crucial services help victims stabilize their lives, and we respond to their physical and emotional needs to help them gain protection for participating in the criminal justice system. We have heard the voices of survivors. We have asked, what do you think you would have done if our services didn't exist? The answers are painful but clear, and I quote directly from our surveys. I would have gone back and gotten killed or ended up on the street. I would have most likely stayed in a dangerous situation due to not having anywhere to go. I would have given up. I would be dead. As advocates and allies, today we ask for your support. We would like to thank Senator Favola and Delegate Delaney for sponsoring these bills. And we urge our state legislators, Delegates Barry Knight, Alex Askew, Michael Fegan, Robert Bloxham, Anna Farrell-Tata, Kelly Converse Fowler, Senators Bill Stepp and Aaron Rouse, and Christy Newcraig. We ask you to reconsider this allocation of resources and prioritize the needs of your citizens. Please vote for budget amendments SB 30, HB 30, so that funding from the General Assembly can establish a Put Victims First grant program to fill this gap. Every dollar dedicated to the essential services for survivors of domestic and sexual violence and human trafficking is an investment in safety, where individuals can live free from fear and violence. So healing and hope is not just an aspiration, but a tangible reality. Thank you. I turn the podium over to my esteemed colleague, Sanu Jain, from Transitions Family Violence Services.
Thank you for being here with us today. My name is Sumi Jain. Transitions Family Violence Services has been offering comprehensive services for the past 45 years. And for the first time in the 15 years that I've been at the organization, I'm actually terrified about our ability to confidently say that we offer comprehensive services, such as 24-hour hotlines, emergency shelter, counseling services for children that have witnessed horrific things in their homes and in their communities, and the adults that care for them. Legal services for those that need help to navigate through the legal system to get the protection that they feel like they need, and not having someone there to answer their questions or their concerns, or more importantly, safety plan with them to be safe and to continue to live. So at Transitions, we are asking for the support of all of our state legislators. We're asking for Senator Mimi Locke, Delegate Jalon Ward, Delegate Cordoza, Senator Danny Diggs to support this bill, because we want to be able to continue to serve children and adults that are impacted by domestic violence on the peninsula. I recall receiving a call from a hotline, on our hotline, from a young lady. She worked for a very well-respected health system here in our community. And she's a homeowner, she has 2 children, and she was contemplating whether she could leave her abusive relationship of 5 years because she wasn't sure if she would be able to sustain things on her own. She was worried about housing, she was worried about transportation, she was worried about childcare, all the things that we're able to supplement temporarily for families so that they don't have to worry about those challenges when they're trying to leave a relationship. And we talked for over 45 minutes to say that her safety was a priority, that we would be there and walk alongside her to make sure that she was safe, her and her children. But I'm worried about that phone call when I have to tell someone, I'm sorry, we can't offer you shelter. We have a wait list, or I have to outsource you somewhere else, or I have to call one of my sister organizations to say, do you have space? And we all have to juggle. I'm also concerned, as a member of the State Advisory Committee for Domestic Violence, that if we don't rectify this issue, that we will lose a significant amount of programs around the state, which will overwhelm communities around the state, where we already now have an influx of folks after COVID-19. What will we do with those individuals that are seeking help? What will we do for those that are saying, I need you, and we can't respond? So again, we urge our state legislators to please respond swiftly and quickly. Don't hesitate. Don't think twice about the lives of those in the state of Virginia. They matter, just like your vote does. Thank you. And at this time, I'm going to introduce Michelle Ellis-Young with the YWCA.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this morning. Again, my name is Michelle Ellis-Young, and I have the privilege of stewarding the mission of YWCA South Hampton Roads, where every day we work to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. We've been doing this work in community for more than 114 years. Specifically in the city of Norfolk, we provide domestic violence services as a service provider for those experiencing domestic violence, sexual assault, and intimate partner violence. The work that we do in the city matters. The people that we serve in the city matters. Our work is a collective work as well. It's a work that's done not just with my sister organizations that are here, but through many partners through our Norfolk Family Justice Center, that provides comprehensive wraparound services for victims, not just of domestic violence, but those that are experiencing all types of violence, whether they are citizens in our community or they're just visiting our community. I want to speak to the heart of the people behind these missions and those that make the mission happen every single day. There is no need for me to rehash what my counterparts have already discussed. I think we all get it. This is critical, not just for those that we serve, but for the safety of the communities in which we all enjoy our freedoms. It is also important for our staffing. We are in a time, post-pandemic, where our staffing needs are greatly increased. You know, there's the scripture that says, to whom much is given, much is required. We are given a lot in this day and age. A lot from the people who are suffering, who are experiencing traumatic instances of domestic violence, gender-based violence, and all other types of results. And much is required of us to still do what we need to do to ensure that we don't turn souls away, that we are the answer for people in their most critical times, that we are support for those who say, I need help, whether it's the first time or the 7th time. And so it is incumbent upon our congressional leaders, our state's delegates, to ensure that what we need here in Hampton Roads remains intact. If we all want to have safe communities, if we want to have teams of people who are healthy and whole, who make the mission happen every single day. I'm experiencing, just with my staff alone, as one of the largest providers in this area, a tremendous amount of burnout, of PTSD, to be honest, because this work is hard. And it's hard for people to show up every day. Just imagine if your role was to answer a hotline call 8 hours a day for those that are experiencing crisis. But imagine if you called that number, because that's the number we told you to call, but there's no one on the other end to answer it. This is what it means to our services. It means that we have to reduce the number of team members that show up to provide care in community. It means that those lines will go unanswered. It means that our community and our workplaces won't be safe. So we implore you on today, as you think about the legislation that is before the Senate and the House, VOCA has to be fixed. VOCA has to remain intact because our communities are greatly depending on those funding needs. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Olivia Smith-Berger from the H.E.R shelter.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining this morning. Obviously, this is a very important topic, and it's very close to all of our hearts. My name is Olivia Smith-Berger. I am the Executive Director of the H.E.R shelter. We have been serving survivors in Portsmouth and Chesapeake for the past 35 years. And I am here with my sister organizations to tell you how important it is that we continue to fund the services that we are talking about today. Emergency shelter and services are crucial to domestic violence survivors. We also provide a survey to our clients and ask, what would you have done if this resource wasn't available? Me, sadly, also here, I would be dead. They would have killed me, or I would have killed myself. I would not be here. I would not be able to stand up and be here for my children. That would have been it. The fact that that could be the case for these individuals is terrifying and is a disjustice to them. Collectively, as organizations in Hampton Roads, we serve over thousands of individuals per year. Thousands. That's hotline calls, that's going to court, that's helping with child support, custody, all of these important services. That's thousands of people. If this funding decrease makes us so that we cannot provide those services, somebody will end up paying with their lives. Somebody will not have made it because we couldn't pick up the phone. We couldn't go with them. We couldn't be there for them. We didn't have enough staff to be at the shelter so that we could accept the clients. These are important things. They matter. And we are asking for policy leaders to stand with survivors and ensure that crucial funding is received by the agencies doing this work. So thank you so much for joining us.
You have questions?
Just a few. How did we get to this point, if you don't mind me asking? For those who might be watching, they might have no idea what VOCA even is. Is this something that has been historically underfunded in the past? How did we get to this point? Sorry, I'll-
Just put it in the middle. Actually, it might be easier if you
Who are you
just answer
asking?
this one.
Anyone in?
Whoever wants to jump in.
Okay, so there's a policy brief that we put out with our media advisory, and I would check the specifics in the policy brief. However, VOCA has been declining since 2018, and that's why we're talking about a 5-year cliff that we're about to go off of. We have spent a few years declining and declining and declining, and at this point, we cannot decline anymore. It is now affecting critical, essential services. We have removed every non-critical piece that we can from our programs, and now we're at the point that this is critical. If you check the policy brief that we sent out, you'll see that the Victims of Crime Act is funded with cases in Virginia where folks, and in the nation, where folks that are paying restitution for crimes, all that money goes into the VOCA pot, the Victims of Crime Act pot, and that money is redistributed to programs like ours in the state of Virginia. So the amount of money that is available to distribute has declined over time, and we are hitting this cliff now in fiscal year 25. So as of July this year of 24, we are not going to have enough money for our services to be even at
So I can tell you, from the YWCA Hampton Roads perspective, what it meant to us initially was impacts on our hotline. Initially, we answered our own hotline 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. With staffing challenges, it became very difficult for us to be able to do that. And so we had to turn over because of funding cuts, not being able to pay staff 24/7, turn over our hotline in portion to the state's hotline to provide the services needed to answer the calls. That is not an ideal situation for a grassroots community organization who cares about community to have to do that. And so when we have to make staffing decisions that impact services to those that live in our communities, we all suffer from that. The other thing I want to just dovetail on what Robin said is that we have to be very clear. The funding cuts that we are experiencing are a direct result of the politicalization of people who deserve better. And I want to be clear about that. Those funding cuts were a travesty because people who were incriminated, charged, did not have to pay fines, did not have to pay fees at the federal level. And so that started to trickle down to what we're experiencing right here in Hampton Roads. And so we're at an impasse right now of what we all can do to service our clients. No longer can I call Olivia and say, do you have shelter space? Or can we, collaborate on something? Because she's as stressed as I am. Sanu is as stressed as I am. Robin is as stressed as I am. So our capacity to care for collectively is impacting the safety and security of our community.
My final question for me is, we're talking about these cuts, but the need itself for these services, like you've all touched upon, it's not going down. In fact, would it even be increasing? Is that what we're seeing? We've only been here for 30 days in 2024, but what is it already looking like?
It's already looking like we can't handle the tsunami that's hitting. That's what it's looking like. And it sounds harsh, it sounds drastic, but it's the reality. We don't have the capacity to keep up with the demand of violence. And I'm not just saying just DV, the other pieces of DV that are penetrating our community. We don't have the resources to be able to keep up with what's going on in community. And so these funding cuts are critical.
And I know that you guys are very passionate about what you do and helping the community, so I appreciate all that you do and having us here today. But going back to, you said since the pandemic, we've been seeing a huge increase with deadly domestic violence. And then when I hear Robin, you say, the woman said that she would go back and just be killed. I guess what goes through your mind when you hear things like that? And then what can we as the community do to support you?
I would say the community could support us by getting involved in your local program. Support your local program with volunteerism. Support your local program with dollars. And I know that's hard. We're all experiencing economic hard times, inflation as far as rents, the cost of food has gone up drastically, and people are just trying to make it. But your organizations need your support. That dollar, that $100, that $500. Asking maybe if you are a professional service that you offer, if you can offer that to your organization for free so that that's something that we can reallocate to more of our programmatic work. It's hard to get those calls when you know that someone's life is in danger, and none of us want that on our conscience. And as Ellis Young said, the burnout with our staff, it also discourages people from wanting to do this work with us because they don't want to hear those calls, or they're nervous about signing up for a hotline shift. Our hotline has been significantly impacted as well with staffing as well as our counseling programs. So I would say give to your local organization, but then also join us in this fight today by calling your local legislators and saying enough is enough. Support this bill and make sure that they have the funding. We wouldn't second guess for one moment police officers, firefighters, EMT. we would fund them and make sure that they continue to have the funding that they needed to be able to respond to emergencies. We are first responders as well. We haven't had a break since COVID-19, and we keep showing up each and every day. So this funding really impacts us, and we want to make sure that we're here to stay.
When you say there's been a 47.5% cut, is that since like 2018, or that's what's at stake in July?
That's in the last 5 years, and see, we are towards the end of this cliff. And what we really need is these two bills to be passed so that the funding gap for $30 million can fill that gap so that we can sustain funding and our organizations can remain whole. And that is just a temporary solution for the next 2 years. If you read this policy brief, you will have, see the specifics on that. But yeah, we've been experiencing a decrease in funding over the last 5 years, but this is far the most drastic, and we are the most concerned about next fiscal year, which starts in July.
Are you getting good feedback that these are gonna pass, or is it not getting responses, or were you here?
Well, this is why we're here today. Right? We wouldn't be here today if we thought the funding gap was going to be filled without this kind of advocacy and without this kind of help, asking our legislators and asking the community to write letters and to push this through. So no, we don't all feel secure. Sanu started off saying she was terrified. I'm terrified. I think we're all terrified up here what's going to happen in our communities. The effect it has on the court system and the effect it has on law enforcement is they have to cover the kinds of things that we do. There's over 2,000 protective orders, misdemeanor domestic violence cases in Virginia Beach. Who's going to go to court with these victims now? Who's going to talk to them about how to get through the system and how to apply for a protective order and then to go back a second and third time? Who's going to do that? It's going to affect other community members, other services in our community. It will affect them if our services are decreased. We have had up to 4 victim advocates in the past, assisting victims in the court system. We're down to 2. How could we critically go down to 1 when we're assisting over 1,000 victims a year with our 2 victim advocates? Who are we going to say no to? Who's going to make that decision? How your case is more important than someone else's case. We don't have enough victim advocacy services to go with you to court. You're on your own. And so that's just going to impact the court system. It's going to impact other services greatly. We do a lot to fill gaps in our community to help these victims, and we're terrified.
I would just add, because I think we do a lot of education across the community around what domestic violence is. And people may still have the preconceived notion that it's the shoving and the pushing and the control and the economic abuse. Since COVID, we have seen these cases become more complex. I know that you hear about gun violence all the time and the horrific stories, and we're dealing with the same thing, where the intersection between gun violence and domestic violence, human trafficking, child abuse, it's grown exponentially. And so the level of services and safety that people are asking for us has grown, and it's become more costly for us as well. And so when we say that, this is life-threatening to not continue to support this bill, we really mean it, because we're trying to combat so much already with the complexities of what folks are dealing with, looking for housing, dealing with just food, but then also just the safety component that maybe sometimes moving to a sister locality is not enough. Maybe we need to relocate you out of state. That all costs money that we have to have the resources for. And so, again, just emphasizing the importance of this bill.
The other thing we're talking about here is these funds are just simply for replenishment. This is not for us, this is for us to scale back to where we once were. This is not for us to be able to grow and expand our programs in the much needed areas that we professionally know we need to have in our organizations to better benefit our communities. And so when we are not able to address the growing needs to scale our services that provides a next level of care for individuals, then we are jeopardizing not only our families that we are entrusted to steward, but we're also failing our community when we know what needs to be done. And so replenishment of these funds at $30 million is a stopgap measure. It is not all of what needs to be done. And long gone are the days where we act like domestic violence is a hunger game. You get a little bit, you get a little bit, and you get a little bit, and y'all go and do some great work. We should not have to legislate for humanity. It's simply the right thing to do.
How, if you don't mind me asking, how much funding do we have this year in comparison to what it used to look like? Do you have like a number like that you can compare it to, just like to show that like decrease? If not, I understand.
You can see it in the policy,
Yeah.
you can see it in the policy brief, but, we're looking at cuts to Samaritan House alone at $200,000 to $300,000.
I think we've averaged about $600K for our organization. That's several departments.
Wow.
We're much smaller, but we've also decreased about 100,000. We're about at 200,000.
Over the 5-year gap.
It's a significant portion for your direct service staff to
Wow.
do this work.
Just really quickly, when you talk about the impacts on the community, a lot of times people aren't thinking about the impacts on the children who are witnessing these horrific actions, sometimes physical, a lot of times mental. Can you just talk about how the children are impacted by witnessing this, and if you guys can help them, what does it look like for them?
I think when it comes to the children, obviously domestic violence is a tough topic in general, right? But when you talk about children, they're seeing these things, they're experiencing these things, even if it's secondhand trauma, this is having an impact on them. Us not being able to provide services for their mother, their father, whoever is experiencing violence, is going to impact them as well. If there's not resources out there for people to reach out to, how are the children going to get help? Oftentimes, kids can also fall through the cracks. Maybe it is the mother or the father that's being abused, and they don't necessarily think that the children is aware of it, but I think we all know that children are much more aware of things around them than we sometimes assume they are. So us not being able to provide the baseline services just means that it's going to continue to impact children, children that maybe are already being impacted negatively, and that's just going to continue to compound and increase.
I believe he was 11 years old. We have a children's services counselor that works with families, and specifically their role is to work with the children who are experiencing some type of violence. And I happened to be walking through my office where his mother was receiving her counseling services. And the children's services coordinator was sitting there with this young man. I think he was about 11 years old. And I just stopped by to say hi. He's in the office. How are you? And he didn't say hi. When he heard me say, hey, how are you? He said, I'm stressed. And I looked at this little child. He's 11 and he knows what stress is. And so we started to talk about why you're stressed. It was because of what's going on in his household. Not by his father, by a man who happens to date his mother. And so these kids are exposed to things far too soon that they should never experience, first of all. But when they do experience it, where are they going to go? To school, and then they become behavioral problems in schools. And then we have to figure out how do we co-parent with the school and that parent to be able to take care of those children. Our children are suffering at astronomical rates. Domestic violence tends to be a primary reason for the children that we are seeing, because we have counseling services for community that people can come in, but usually it's attached to some form of violence in the house. And so if we're not able to take care of the services that are necessary, we're failing the next generation of children who are already crying out for help.
Also, one thing that I wanted to add to that is when we're talking about services, you had asked what were some services that we had to decrease or cut down on. I think one for us was a lot of the outreach, education, and awareness. Going into schools and teaching what red flags are, what are healthy dating, what does a healthy relationship look like. Those are things that we were not able to have staff to do. And that is definitely impacting the children that, at that 11, 12, 13 age, they're not having those discussions about what a healthy relationship looks like. And that's definitely impacting, their ability as they get older to notice what those red flags are.
I think that is all of the questions that we have. If there's anything else that you want the community or lawmakers specifically to know, feel free to share that with us.
So I'm thankful you asked that question about children. 60% of the victims that come into our emergency shelter every year are children. So when mom is a victim of domestic violence, or dad, whoever the person is that is being perpetrated against, the children come with them. And so without having emergency services, emergency shelter for children and families, they're gonna stay in those homes and continue to be secondarily victims of trauma, from verbal abuse to sexual abuse to physical abuse. So if you think about just the folks that we serve, 60% are children. And so that's a high number. And so I'm so glad you brought that up.
I would just add to that, just to make it full circle about children. Children who witness domestic violence in the home are more likely to either grow up and perpetrate that violence or become a victim of that violence. And so right now is a time that we cannot afford to decrease services for those children to work through the trauma that they've experienced, to learn coping skills, to process what they've experienced, to grow up to be great citizens that are healthy and understand that that was part of their past and it doesn't have to be part of their future. But also these kids are going to school. And in the state of Virginia, we're seeing a decrease of educators. Educators that are saying they don't feel safe in the classrooms. Educators that are being tasked with not only just teaching their kids, but being the social worker, being the parent, and now being the counselor to work with some of the behavior issues that you're gonna see. And sometimes those children coming to school and acting out the same violence that they're seeing in the home, and sometimes hurting their teachers or even their peers. And so as we talk about the need for this funding, like we wouldn't think twice about first responders or teachers. We need that funding so that we can help other systems to alleviate some of that stress that they're feeling, so that teachers can get back to doing what they do best, which is teaching, and we can do what we do best, which is helping people heal through the trauma that they experience.
We thank you guys for bringing this together. It speaks to just how important it is that 4 different agencies have come together to speak out on this, so thank you. Anything else you guys want people to know in the community or lawmakers?
I wanted to
Oh, I'm
make sure
sorry.
that we had a chance to, I want to clarify the number that people should call if they're experiencing domestic violence or abuse. So,
Yeah. Yeah, we can do it for each city, and there's also a statewide number, but for Virginia Beach, for victims, 757-430-2120 is Samaritan House's 24-hour hotline.
For transitions, family violence services, we serve Hampton, Newport News, Pocosin, and a co-provider for York County, and we are 757-723-7774.
YWCA South Hampton Roads, which services south side of Hampton Roads, Southampton County, and Franklin, the city of Franklin and Franklin County, 757-251-0144.
Help and emergency response under the H.E.R shelter. We serve Portsmouth and Chesapeake, Virginia, and our hotline number is 757-485-3384.
The other thing I just want to bring to our attention, someone asked about legislators. We're seeing an increase in elder abuse. So I speak to the heart of the legislators who are in the population of the elderly. These are people who are showing up in our shelters with their daughters, primarily, even though we service men. If we can't take care of the generation in front of us, that could be one of their parents, that could be one of their grandparents, or it could be them. then we're missing another generation that we take care of as well. And the statewide hotline number is 1-800-838-8238.
Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
I'll grab it.